LoveLore Library. Chapter 361, Master of Forging, 3, the in-charge forced a smile. She only forged one finished weapon today, but the skills she displayed are no worse than mine. I wonder who her master is. Perhaps, only a Grand Master is able to teach such a genius. The elderly's eyes deepened at the words. Everyone thinks that the level of one's martial skills will enable them to attain a different status. However, regardless of forging or refining pills, one would not have any other concerns if they reached the level of a Grand Master, as powerful figures would offer their services to obtain the items they produced. I wonder how Enchanting's cultivation is currently. If there's nothing outstanding, she could focus on forging armaments. With her talent, it is not impossible to reach the level of a Grand Master, the in-charge mumbled. In this world, it was extremely rare for people to reach the state of a Grand Master, and only a few were successful in the past 1,000 years. And those few people had average cultivations, but any random divine weapons they produced could attract a group of people offering their services. No matter how powerful the mighty figures were, they would still seek an exceedingly strong weapon, and thus, Grand Masters were people who they had to treat politely the most. It seems that I need to make a trip to the inner sex Elder's Hall. The elderly rubbed his beard as he thought. If Enchanting really had the ability to become a Grand Master of forging, she would no longer be as simple as an ordinary disciple to Xianling's sect. If Xianling's sect could raise a Grand Master, it would have an exceptional significance. At that thought, the elderly did not stay any longer in the Sword Spirit Workshop and left immediately. Enchanting, who exited the Sword Spirit Workshop, did not realize how lucky she was today as she joyously hugged her demonic blood sword and dagger all the way back to her residence. In the yard, Fei Ying was cleaning up the fallen leaves and immediately greeted Enchanting when he saw her. "Are you in a very good mood today, miss?" Fei Ying blinked at Enchanting. Enchanting chuckled and nodded. Suddenly recalling something, she opened her space ring and took some items out. "Tell Enrich to come here." Fei Ying nodded and immediately called for Enrich. When Enchanting saw the two young teens standing before her, she finally placed the items that she just took out into their hands. "No matter what your identities are currently, according to your talents, you will not remain here forever as long as you cultivate diligently from now on." Enchanting handed Fei Ying and Enrich two basic cultivation techniques which, although were not considered rare, were the most suitable for their age. Only by laying a strong foundation from young would there be better effects in one's cultivation in the future. Apart from cultivation techniques, Enchanting also handed them a few bottles of She Spirit pills. These were all exchanged when she was in the outer sect. Now that she had the soul condensation pills after entering the inner sect, the She Spirit pills were naturally no longer suitable for her. Disbelief filled the eyes of the two kids as they looked at the pile of items in their hands. The identity of a sword boy or attendant girl was equivalent to that of servants in the inner sect. To guard against their sword boy and attendant girl from developing, many disciples never allowed them to have too much contact with things related to martial skills, much less take the initiative to give them cultivation techniques and elixirs. "Miss, we cannot accept these items." Enrich frantically shook her head and returned the items to Enchanting. Fei Ying, similarly, was overwhelmed by this unexpected favor and was a little frightened. Chapter 362, Mission 1, Enchanting would never treat the people around her poorly. After entering the inner sect in her previous life, the sword boy and attendant girl appointed to her treated her pretty well, and that was a slight portion of warmth she received in the sect. However, those two kids were probably not yet 10 right now and had not been selected by the sect. She was not powerful enough in her previous life and could not do anything for them. Meeting Fei Ying and Enrich this time was considered a kind of fate. In her previous life, Fei Ying was able to become an official inner sect disciple through his own talent, and what she did merely won her a favor. Rather, it was enrich. She had never heard anything about enrich in her previous life, but she could tell that enrich's talent was not any lower than Fei Ying's from these few days. Yet somehow, she did not manage to become an official disciple in her previous life. The two kids still wanted to reject the gifts but were forced to accept them by Enchanting. With a pile of items in their hands, Fei Ying and enrich were both surprised and delighted. They thanked her continuously and engraved this precious favor of hers in their hearts. It was really their blessing to be able to meet such a nice person like Enchanting. Enchanting waved a hand for them to continue with their work. There was not much work in the courtyard on usual days, and the two kids were idle most of the time. As a sword boy, Fei Ying could exchange a few moves with Enchanting. However, Enchanting's method of cultivation was not similar to that of normal people. Thus, she rarely allowed Fei Ying to practice with her. Rather than letting the two of them waste their time, allowing them to cultivate and improve their skills in their spare time was much better. With a weapon she adored, Enchanting would naturally not neglect her cultivation. A month passed in the blink of an eye. Apart from giving the two kids some guidance in their cultivation, most of her time was spent on upgrading herself. The spirit energy in the inner sect was much richer than the outer sect, and this was more nourishing for Enchanting's spirit root. After entering the inner sect for a month, new disciples were required to begin accepting sect missions. However, before that, Enchanting had already accepted 2 rewarded missions by herself and earned quite a lot of Xianming points, which she used to cultivate in the Spirit Consonance River. It was a coincidence that her first sect-appointed mission was actually together with the Blood Moon Sect Elder. When the Blood Moon Sect Elder saw Enchanting, there was a subtle change in his expression, and it was not as resistant as before. Some outer sect disciples have not returned from their sect mission within the stipulated timing. The sect wants me to take a look. Enchanting looked at the mission scroll, and when she thought of the word disappearance, her eyes fell on the Blood Moon Sect Elder. The mass disappearance of disciples from different sects was mostly related to the Blood Moon Sect's resurrection. However, the disappearance situation stopped afterward. Now that there was another disappearance case 2 months later, Enchanting could not help but suspect whether it was related to the Blood Moon Sect. The Blood Moon Sect Elder was rather annoyed by Enchanting's stare. "Don't look at me. I've always been in Xianling's sect during this period of time, and even if a disciple did disappear, it has nothing to do with me. Even if he wanted to, there was no opportunity." Moreover, with Enchanting's threat and temptation using the source of the marrow pill and bonded soul pill, how would he act recklessly under her watch? "I know it's not you. I'm just asking if you have any clues," Enchanting said. The Blood Moon Sect Elder replied. "How would I have any clues? Everyone from the Blood Moon Sect had their souls sealed back then, and most of them were scattered everywhere. How would I be able to know anything?" Enchanting was troubled over the matter as well and was more vigilant. If this incident was really related to the Blood Moon Sect, there was nothing bad about the Blood Moon Sect Elder following along. Chapter 363, Mission 2. This time, Enchanting's mission location was at the Floating Light Canyon, which was some distance away from Xianling's sect. Traveling to and fro would take at least 1 month. After making some preparations, the two of them set off immediately. In the Floating Light Canyon, a few figures shuffled through the dense forest in a panic. They were dressed in the Xianling sect's outer sect uniform, but at that instant, these sect disciples no longer had the arrogance and distinguished air around them as before, with dirt and wounds covering their bodies. The Wind Sword sect people probably would not be able to catch up so quickly. "Let's take a rest for now," a Xianling sect disciple panted. The dirt on his face could not cover his pale complexion. The other people slowly stopped after hearing that, and they panted with an ugly expression. The 7 people were all Xianling sect's outer sect disciples and had received a sect mission a month before. After heading to the floating light canyon, the entire mission was completed relatively successfully. However, no one had expected that they would actually encounter an accident when they were about to return. A pale Su Wan was in the team as well. She pursed her lips lightly and looked towards Lu Xiaowen, who was frowning and breathing unsteadily. Senior Brother Lu, will the people from the Wind Sword sect still chase after us? Lu Xiaowen's expression was very ugly at that moment. This was the first sect mission he accepted after recovering from the injury, yet unexpectedly, he was met with such a setback. Then, Lu Xiaowen did not reply to Su Wan and rather looked at another disciple in the team. That disciple was tall and handsome, but his expression was extremely ugly at that instant with wounds all over his body. It could be said that his injuries were the most severe amongst the 7 of them. Xiao Mo, this incident started because of you. With things as such, shouldn't you give us an explanation? Lu Xiaowen threw his words coldly. His voice attracted the attention of other people in the team. The reason for having to go in hiding in the floating light canyon so miserably was something done by that disciple called Xiao Mo, Junior Brother Lu. This was just an accident. Junior Brother Qiao did not wish for this either. Don't say any more already. What is most important right now is to flee from this place, a disciple mediated. Lu Xiaowen scoffed as he looked at the pale Qiao Mo accident. If he did not offend the Wind Sword sect disciples for nothing, why would they attack us? Furthermore, it was originally their own business, but he did not know what was good for him and had to join in. Now that he stirred up such a huge matter, why do we have to suffer together with him? Lu Xiaowen's words were relatively harsh, and Qiao Mo's expression turned even uglier. The Wind Sword sect and they usually stayed out of each other's way. Nothing happened initially when they met, but Xiao Mo happened to see his fiancée in the group of Wind Sword sect disciples. As the two groups passed by each other, he caught sight of the young lady joking with a Wind Sword sect disciple flirtatiously, which infuriated him immediately. He reasoned with them, but both parties were angered as they argued and ended up in a physical brawl. The number of Wind Sword sect disciples was double of theirs, and when they fought, the 7 people from Xianling sect naturally were not the Wind Sword sect's opponents. In the end, the Xianling sect disciples were still unable to escape after being cornered in the floating light canyon by the Wind Sword sect disciples for days. Chapter 364, Mission 3, You don't have the skills, but you still stirred up these troubles. Qiao Mo, if you are a man, you should answer for your own acts and admit your mistakes to the Wind Sword sect people. Don't implicate us. Lu Xiaowen's brows were tightly furrowed as displeasure filled him. Qiao Mo hung his head low. He was the most severely injured and was extremely vexed over implicating his fellow senior and junior brothers. After being incited by Lu Xiaowen, Qiao Mo straightened himself with difficulty and said, Junior Brother Lu is right. I should answer for my own acts. I'll look for the Wind Sword sect people right now. Seeing that Qiao Mo was about to leave while struggling with all the injuries, the other disciples stopped him immediately. What do you mean answering for your own acts? We are all Xianling sect disciples and are senior and junior brothers. Deep down, everyone was aware that although the conflict was started because of Qiao Mo, the sect's prestige was at stake right now. If Qiao Mo were to be handed over, what would become of them? Pieces of trash that betrayed a fellow disciple to ensure their own safety. Lu Xiaowen's expression turned colder. He did not intend to waste any time here. An outer sect elder recently thought highly of him, and he learned quite a number of cultivation techniques, which improved his skills greatly. This delay would waste so much time that could have been used to upgrade himself. Senior Brother Lu's words have some reason in them. The number of us is fewer than that of the Wind Sword sect. If they don't retreat, God knows how long we will be surrounded here for. It is already past the mission submission deadline. If we return any later, I'm afraid we would all be punished. Su Wan echoed after Lu Xiuwen. Over this period of time, Su Wan witnessed Lu Xiuwen's improvement, and she was naturally more hopeful. Given Lu Xiuwen's improvements, it seemed that he probably had a chance of becoming an inner sect disciple in the inner sect assessment next year. As the group was arguing, a few figures suddenly appeared. I was still wondering where you all hid. So it is here. A tall young man who was donned in the Wind Sword Sect's outer sect uniform walked with large strides towards the group with over 10 Wind Sword Sect disciples following behind him. The appearance of the Wind Sword Sect disciples caused the Xianling Sect disciples to be on full alert. What do you all want to do? A Xianling Sect disciple asked in a low tone. What do we want to do? The leader of the Wind Sword Sect disciples scoffed. He scanned the faces of the people from Xianling Sect, and his eyes eventually fell on Qiao Mo. You Xianling Sect disciples do not have any manners and are actually asking me what I want to do now. He offended a disciple of my sect. Has Xianling Sect never taught you how to settle this matter? Qiao Mo's expression was a little ugly. He looked at the blustering and truculent Wind Sword Sect people and then looked back at the miserable appearance of his fellow disciples. He clenched his fist silently and took a step forward. I was the perpetrator. If you have anything, just come at me. The Wind Sword Sect disciple raised a brow at Qiao Mo and cackled instantly. You have some sense of responsibility. My requirements are not high. His eyes sharpened. Suddenly, he lifted the hem of his clothing and stepped on a stump with his left foot. Tapping his thigh, he laughed with an ill intention. As long as you crawl between my legs and admit your mistake with 3 kowtows, this matter can be considered to be over. It'll bring my people away immediately and allow you all to leave the floating light canyon. The expressions of all Xianling Sect disciples were extremely ugly upon hearing the Wind Sword Sect disciple. Scoundrel! You're going too far. Chapter 365, Mission 4, Go Too Far. The Wind Sword Sect disciple scoffed. The moment he finished his sentence, the group of Wind Sword Sect disciples people immediately drew out their swords, which gleamed threateningly. Is it just an apology from him or all of you seeking death together? The choice is all up to you. Do you think we are really afraid of you? Let's fight if that's what you want. A Xianling Sect disciple took it upon himself to draw out his sword in preparation for a fight. Other disciples, similarly, drew out their swords and made their stand clear. Looking at his fellow disciples who fully supported him, Qiao Mo's eyes reddened, touched by the bonds of his fellow disciples. Wuxia World. Sight, you said you'll let all of us go as long as I apologize. Qiao Mo took a deep breath. A man should have dignity and not bow down, not to mention the insult of crawling between one's legs. However, this incident was started because of him, and his fellow disciples were already suffering together with him. Since they had the heart of protecting him, how could he drag them into danger? That's right. I live up to my words. As long as you apologize obediently, we Wind Sword Sect disciples are not unreasonable, the Wind Sword Sect disciple said with a raised brow. The Xianling Sect disciples looked at Qiao Mo in shock, and their faces were agitated. Junior brother Qiao, you must not do it. How could they tolerate others insulting their fellow disciple right before their eyes? As everyone was about to persuade Qiao Mo, Lu Xiuwen suddenly spoke. It cannot be better that Qiao Mo knows clearly the right thing to do and the principles to follow. Senior brothers, why bother going against Qiao Mo's painstaking decision? This was originally started by him, and now that he can shoulder everything by himself, what is there to not do? Lu Xiuwen. Shut up. A Xianling Sect disciple glared at Lu Xiuwen angrily. If not for the situation, he would have really killed the heartless betrayer that is Lu Xiuwen. Senior brother Lu didn't say anything wrong. It was Xiao Mo who acted rashly and offended the Wind Sword sect disciple, which caused us to be in such a hopeless situation. Is there anything wrong if he apologizes now? Su Wan echoed. As the Xianling sect disciples argued amongst themselves, the Wind Sword sect disciples snickered as they watched the show. It seems that there are some logical people in Xianling sect as well. It was a casual sentence, but the sarcasm was exceptionally obvious. They were clearly disciples of the same sect, yet they persuaded a fellow disciple to be insulted in fear of being implicated. Such a thing would never happen in their Wind Sword sect. Everyone, my mind is set. I am the one who implicated everyone in this matter. Xiao Mo took a deep breath and walked forward, looking coldly at the Wind Sword sect disciple who lifted a leg and was waiting for him to crawl under. Junior brother Qiao, Wuxia World. Some Xianling sect disciples wanted to stop him, but Xiao Mo had already made up his mind. Shutting his eyes in resignation, he bent his knees and kneeled on the ground. The mockery in the Wind Sword sect disciples' eyes deepened as they waited for Xiao Mo to humiliate himself. However, as Xiao Mo's knees were about to touch the ground, there was a cold sensation on his knees suddenly. Xiao Mo opened his eyes in surprise and suddenly saw. A sword was placed across his knees, which supported his knees up straight. Shock flashed past Xiao Mo's eyes. He looked up and saw. A stunning girl in a Xianling sect uniform was standing beside him with a smile while the handle of that sword was in her hands. A man should have dignity and not bow down. How can our Xianling sect disciple kneel down so easily? A casual voice along with a cool breeze entered everyone's ears. On that exquisite face, her cherry red lips were curled into an evil smile. Chapter 366, Mighty Senior Sister, 1, Who are you? The Wind Sword sect disciple saw that the outcome was about to be settled and did not expect such a thing to happen. That girl tilted her head slightly as her bright eyes glanced across the group of Wind Sword sect disciples. The Wind Sword sect disciple wanted to berate the girl but was suddenly stopped by his companion. Don't speak carelessly. That is Xianling sect's inner sect disciple. What? The Wind Sword sect disciple fixed his eyes on her. Although the girl was wearing Xianling sect's uniform, it was different from that of Xiao Mo's and the rest, with the most obvious difference being the embroidery that symbolized an inner sect disciple in front of her chest. This look caused the group of Wind Sword sect disciples to pale. Inner sect disciple. They were only a group of outer sect disciples from Wind Sword sect, and as sect disciples, how would they now know the world of differences between the inner and outer sect? It's Senior Sister Yi. A Xianling sect disciple recognized that girl with just a look and was shocked. It's Enchanting. Senior Sister Yi. The moment the Xianling sect disciple saw Enchanting, it was as though they saw a ray of light in their darkness of despair. Xiao Mo fell into a trance as he looked at Enchanting with his mouth hung open. What are you still doing there? Do you want me to help you up? Enchanting raised a brow at the absent-minded Xiao Mo. Xiao Mo stood up frantically and looked at Enchanting with admiration and respect. The Blood Moon sect elder beside Enchanting scanned the situation, and the corners of his lips tugged up. He still thought that the disappearance of these disciples was related to the Blood Moon sect, but now it seemed that they were just cornered by other sects' disciples. Senior Sister Yi. Seeing Enchanting, an inner sect disciple, the Xianling sect disciples surrounded her as though they had found a mainstay and looked at her with eyes full of respect. Enchanting nodded slightly. When she saw Lu Xiuan and Su Wan, there was not a slight change in her expression. She merely glimpsed past them as though they were completely unacquainted. Enchanting's sudden appearance caught both Lu Xiuan and Su Wan by surprise. Especially when Xiao Mo and the rest surrounded Enchanting with a look of admiration, Lu Xiuan's face darkened in an instant. Yi Qingtang simply did not bother with Lu Xiuan and Su Wan as her eyes were directly fixed on the Wind Sword sect disciples. What were you all doing just now? Yi Qingtang's tone was neither warm nor cold, but to the Wind Sword sect disciples, that emotionless voice was like a rumble of thunder that caused their hearts to quiver. No. Nothing much. Upon meeting Yi Qingtang, an inner sect disciple, all arrogance was gone in the Wind Sword sect disciples, who were previously blustering and truculent. Expressions of uneasiness were etched on their faces. They initially thought that these dumb fools from Xianling's sect would definitely be toyed around by them. But who would expect that it would actually alarm Xianling's sect's inner sect disciple? And how would they be unaware of the frightening skills that inner sect disciples possessed? Even if all of them went up against her together, it was probably not enough to restrain that one girl. Moreover, there was still another inner sect disciple beside her. Just these two people were enough for them to be unable to bear the consequences of failure. Nothing much. Yi Qingtang raised a brow as she took a glimpse at Xiao Mo, whose complexion had not recovered to normal. Chapter 367, Meiti's Senior Sister, 2, Nothing much, and yet, you dared to make my Xianling sect disciple kneel to you? How bold of you! Yi Qingtang's voice deepened as she spoke. The coldness in her voice caused the Wind Sword sect disciples to break out in cold sweat in fear. It's not it. It's your Xianling sect disciples who started arguing with us first. Thus, we had a conflict, a Wind Sword sect disciple mustered his courage and said. This was also the truth in reality. Oh. Yi Qingtang glanced at a few Xianling sect disciples. What happened exactly? Xiao Mo and the rest obviously did not dare to conceal anything and recounted the incident fully without leaving out any details. After hearing the account, Yi Qingtang swept a look across the Wind Sword sect disciples' faces. It was a brief glance, but the look in her eyes caused goosebumps to rise on all the Wind Sword sect disciples. So, you want my junior brother to crawl between your legs and then kowtow to you in apology? Yi Qingtang said coldly, but when she finished her sentence, her eyes suddenly sharpened. She drew out her demonic blood sword angrily. The demonic blood sword which was just strengthened was dangerously imposing. The moment it left its scabbard, a cold air spread in the air. The Wind Sword sect disciples' legs wobbled in fear at the sight. This was the skill of an inner sect disciple. Before making a strike, they were already exuding such a terrifying and overbearing force. The Wind Sword sect disciples' faces paled instantly, and they did not even dare to let out a fart. Looking at Yi Qingtang, warmth spread in the hearts of Xiao Mo and the rest. Thinking about how they were tightly chased by the Wind Sword sect disciples for these few days, did they still dare to act so arrogantly to them with senior sister Yi here right now? Yi Qingtang's back view was originally tiny, but at that instant, it seemed extremely tall and large. Why? Are you bullying us because you think our Xianling sect is lacking? Yi Qingtang scoffed. The Wind Sword sect disciples were about to vomit in fear from Yi Qingtang's aura but did not dare to retort and only shook their heads violently. It was just a casual talk, yet how dare you corner my junior brothers and not let them go for days? How should I settle this score? Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes. The Wind Sword sect disciples were so close to weeping. A casual talk. How was it a casual talk? It was clearly Xiao Mo who started the fight. Why did it seem like they intentionally stirred up trouble when Yi Qingtang said it? But they did not dare to argue at that instant. The other party was an inner sect disciple and was on a completely different level from them. When they saw inner sect disciples on usual days, all of them were extremely respectful and cautious. This senior sister over here. You can settle it however you want. The Wind Sword sect disciples were really frightened then. Yi Qingtang was not anxious to reply and instead turned around to look at Xiao Mo and the rest. How are your injuries? Their injuries were not severe and were mostly external injuries. It was just that they seemed rather miserable after being chased. They were about to speak, but Yi Qingtang turned around by herself and spoke to the Wind Sword sect disciples. You all caused my junior brothers to be so heavily injured and delayed their return to the sect to submit their mission. Of course, you all must compensate for their loss. The Wind Sword sect disciples' eyes were about to pop out. Heavily injured. How were they heavily injured? Xiao Mo and the rest were dumbfounded. Where did Senior Sister Yi see that they were heavily injured? Chapter 368, Mighty Senior Sister, 3. I've long heard that Wind Sword sect has many spirit pills, including the Elegant Moon pill which you all most likely have. Forget it. Each of you just has to compensate 2 bottles of the Elegant Moon pill, and this matter can be considered to be over, Yi Qingtang said with a smile. The Wind Sword sect disciples' faces darkened. The Wind Sword sect's Elegant Moon pill had similar effects as Xianling sect's She Spirit pill but was more effective. Outer sect disciples like them would only be given 3 bottles every month. Yi Qingtang shaved almost 1 month's quantity away from them. Why? Unwilling. Yi Qingtang looked at the Wind Sword sect disciples' hesitant faces and smiled faintly. She waved her demonic blood sword, and an aura was shot out from the blade. In just an instant, the sword aura swept across the forest nearby, and like a wave, all the trees within 100 meters away were chopped. A loud crashing sound pierced everyone's ears. Everyone stared at the flattened forest with their mouths hung ajar as cold sweat trickled down their foreheads. How terrifying was this power? Senior Sister Yi is so powerful. The Xianling sect disciples were in awe. So this was the ability of an inner sect disciple? After seeing the damage that Yi Qingtang did with just a light move, Lu Ziyuan's face darkened to an extreme instantly. Yi Qingtang actually became this powerful. How could this be? Previously, Lu Xiuan had never witnessed Yi Qingtang's skills during the inner sect assessment and was very skeptical of Yi Qingtang's entrance to the inner sect. However, personally seeing everything today, he suddenly realized that the distance between him and Yi Qingtang had unknowingly widened to a point that it was insurmountable. Even the Blood Moon sect elder beside Yi Qingtang could not help but secretly call her a monster after seeing her skills. It was just a month. How exactly did this girl improve so quickly? The skills of the current Yi Qingtang and when she was taking the inner sect assessment was also a world of differences. In reality, Yi Qingtang's skills improved by a large extent in this 1 month since entering the inner sect. The upgrading of her spirit root and the rich spirit energy in the inner sect allowed her skills to improve rapidly. Now, she had already surpassed Khanate level 9 and entered Martial Qi level 1, a completely unimaginable presence to the outer sect disciples. If you're unwilling, any one of you can come forward to receive 1 move from me. If you can withstand it, this matter can be settled. Yi Qingtang smiled at the Wind Sword sect disciples who were all a miserable shade of white while uttering something that threw them into utter despair. All color was drained from the Wind Sword sect disciples' faces. Who the hell would be able to withstand 1 move from her? Was this not seeking death? Then, no matter how unwilling they were, they could only submit. The group of Wind Sword sect disciples handed the Elegant Moon pills over gloomily. After collecting over 30 bottles of Elegant Moon pill, Yi Qingtang was slightly more satisfied. You all can scram now. The Wind Sword sect disciples did not dare to hang around any longer and fled off hurriedly. Watching them leave, Xiao Mo and the rest felt that their anger was avenged satisfyingly. Thank you, Senior Sister Yi. If not for you today, we would have been humiliated by them. Tears filled the Xianling sect disciples' eyes. It was only when they saw an inner sect disciple from their sect during a crisis and were saved from misery did it occur to them how precious their clothes that symbolized Xianling sect disciple were. Chapter 369, Meidi's Senior Sister. 4. There was a smile in Yi Qingtang's eyes as she looked at the group of disciples. Temporarily leaving aside the fact that the disciples competed amongst each other within the sect, all of them were shouldering the same sect glory once they were out of the sect. We are from the same sect. There's no need to thank me, Yi Qingtang said with a smile. Afterward, she handed the Wind Sword sect disciples compensation of over 30 elegant moon pills to the leading disciple. These are Wind Sword sect's compensation to you all. Divide it amongst yourselves. The disciples shook their heads in a fluster. No, no, no. We cannot accept these, Senior Sister Yi. If not for you, we would have either died or been heavily insulted and injured. We cannot accept these items. Yi Qingtang looked at them funnily. Why can't you accept it? They compensated you all, not me. Furthermore, I only said a few sentences. You are all injured and are delayed by a few days. If not compensated well, you all would fall behind others. The disciples were at a loss of whether to laugh or cry. Senior Sister, those few sentences that you said then were the key. Calculating the price of these elegant moon pills and then the number of sentences that Yi Qingtang said, a single word from her was really almost worth 1,000 taels of gold. The group could not win over Yi Qingtang and could only accept it reluctantly, though their hearts were deeply filled with gratitude. Lu Xiuan and Su Wan had been lingering outside and did not near Yi Qingtang. It was as though the two of them were isolated by the group. Yi Qingtang naturally did not pay them any attention and took a leave first after leaving some instructions for the group. The mission this time was rather simple and unrelated to the Blood Moon sect. Everything was smooth. Yi Qingtang had just left, but the disciples had still not returned to their senses from Yi Qingtang's valiant and heroic bearing. As outer sect disciples, they rarely had chances to interact with inner sect disciples. To them, the words inner sect was unreachable and extremely mysterious. Senior Sister Yi is such a nice person. Xiao Imo scratched his head, and his eyes were filled with gratitude. Did you all see clearly just now? That one move from Senior Sister Yi was so domineering. A disciple was still absorbed in that one move that Yi Qingtang unleashed previously. Just looking at the many trees that were chopped, one could tell how frightening that sword aura was. Did Senior Sister Yi use the sword aura just now? Weren't only martial chi level 1s able to use it? Why do I remember that? Senior Sister Yi had only entered the inner sect for 1 month. The famous story of Yi Qingtang's entrance into the inner sect had long circulated in the outer sect, and the few of them were not unfamiliar with it. However, after seeing her in person today, they realized. Senior Sister Yi was way more domineering than the rumors had told her to be. Senior Sister Yi was able to advance from Khanate level 9 to martial chi level 1 in a month's time. She is indeed powerful and truly the disciple who entered the inner sect in the shortest time. If I have just 10% of her skills, would be content already. Everyone was full of exclamation over Yi Qingtang's skills and did not notice that Lu Xiaowen's face was extremely somber. He had felt that he improved greatly in this 1 month, yet unexpectedly. Yi Qingtang's skills improved at a tremendous pace. With just that little improvement of his, it was an utter joke in comparison to Yi Qingtang. Su Wan looked at Lu Xiaowen's somber side profile and did not dare to say anything further. However, from the incident today, Su Wan realized. Yi Qingtang had long been at another level. Chapter 370, Rage. 1. Why did you just let the people from the Wind Sword sect go? The Blood Moon sect elder followed Yi Qingtang as she walked out of the floating light canyon. He suddenly had other thoughts in his mind. Enchanting stopped and took a glance at the Blood Moon sect elder. Source of the marrow pill. The Blood Moon sect elder was stunned as he heard the words. I just asked only, haha. He avoided Enchanting's eyesight, but how he wished to strangle the girl in front of him. The Blood Moon sect elder felt depressed. Enchanting joined the mission for the sect and the Xianming points. But what could he get? Nothing in the sect was attractive to him, especially the honor of the sect. He could only bear with it when Enchanting suppressed him. Enchanting rubbed her brows as she looked at the Blood Moon sect elder. The old guy would not even behave for a second. If she did not watch him tightly, he would definitely target others. The mission was smooth this time. Enchanting did not wish to waste any time as she still needed to cultivate in the inner sect. She then rushed back to Xianling's sect. The Blood Moon sect elder returned to his yard gloomily when they returned to the sect. Enchanting was amused by his expression and decided to refine some source of the marrow pills for him in the next few days. Enchanting returned to her yard, but she realized that something was not right when she pushed open the gate of the yard. Since she provided Fei Ying and Ni Shang with basic cultivation technique previously, they would cultivate and practice all the time in the yard. However, the yard now was empty and messy. There was the smell of blood in the air. An uneasy feeling rose in her heart. She then rushed into the yard and saw pools of blood on the stone path at the center of the yard. The blood was dry now, but it still stroked her eyes. Young lady, a weak voice came from the house at the side. Enchanting looked towards the house, and she was totally stunned. Fei Ying, who was injured heavily, laid at the door, and his face was full of wounds. You are finally back. Young lady, Enchanting felt uneasier as she looked at his injured body. She then noticed that Ni Shang was not around. She dashed towards Fei Ying and asked, Where is Ni Shang? Fei Ying shivered as he heard the question. Tears flowed out of his swollen eyes. He kneeled in front of Enchanting and knocked his head on the ground constantly. Young lady, please, save Ni Shang, what happened? Enchanting held Fei Ying's collar and dragged him up. Fei Ying was choked with sobs. Ni Shang was brought away by them. I was so useless. I couldn't protect her. Young lady, please, you are the only one who can save her now. Fei Ying told everything to Enchanting slowly. After Enchanting left for her mission, Fei Ying and Ni Shang used all the time to cultivate and guard the yard. They wanted to help Enchanting to look after the silver wolf, but it disappeared one day. Both of them were nervous and worried about the silver wolf. However, danger approached them secretly. Chapter 371, Rage 2. Though Ni Shang was still young, she was almost a fully grown girl with a pretty face. She was quite attractive among the attendant girls. Before Ni Shang was assigned to Enchanting, some inner sect disciples would flirt with her. She did not dare to resist, and she was still young. The situation was better after she was assigned to Enchanting. However, after Enchanting left, the three disciples who liked to flirt with her came again with Song Juanqiu. The four inner sect disciples broke into Enchanting's yard and kidnapped Ni Shang. Fei Ying wanted to stop them, but he was not strong enough to fight against them. He was beaten heavily until he fainted but still could not stop them. Young lady, I'm aware that we are just servants and that our lives worth nothing. But Ni Shang is always loyal. Please save her, Fei Ying begged Enchanting constantly and kneeled onto the floor again. He ignored his injuries and knocked his head heavily onto the ground. The blood on his forehead was transferred onto the stone ground. Enchanting took a heavy breath and asked, besides Song Juanqiu, who are the other three people? Fei Ying then said the names of the other three people. Enchanting felt her brain almost explode after hearing the names. The names that Fei Ying said were the 3 inner sect disciples that he killed in her previous life. That was the reason why she did not hear of Enrish's name in her previous life. Enrich in her previous life most likely did not survive the incident and was tortured to death by the 3 disciples. Fei Ying was stimulated by Enrish's death, and his potential was discovered. He worked hard and became an inner sect disciple. He then tortured the 3 disciples to death. Everything now overlapped with the information from her previous life. Just this time, there was a Song Juanqiu. Young lady, please save her. As long as you are willing to save her, I will serve you for the rest of my life. Fei Ying continued begging. He was slightly younger than Enrich, and she always took care of him. He always treated Enrich as his sister. He hated himself the most when Enrich was humiliated. He hated his weakness and inability. He hated that he did not have the ability to protect her. He also knew that they were inferior compared to the disciples. Even though Enchanting was their young lady, she did not have the duty to provoke other disciples for them. However, he had no other way. I understand now, Enchanting narrowed her eyes and said slowly. She frowned heavily as her sight landed on Fei Ying, who was kneeling in front of her. Follow me. Enchanting then walked out of the yard. Fei Ying was stunned and raised his head. His face was full of confusion. You better hurry up if you want to save her. Enchanting's voice was cold but anxious. She did not know when Enrich was killed in her previous life. According to Fei Ying, Enrich was kidnapped 3 days ago. If they did not save her on time, she might. Fei Ying then realized what Enchanting was going to do. He wiped off his tears and got up from the floor and caught up with Enchanting. The Blood Moon sect elder who just left his yard suddenly saw Enchanting. He wanted to escape instinctively, but Enchanting was covered by a murderous look. Chapter 372, Rage 3. The Blood Moon sect elder was shocked. What was going on? Why was she so fierce? Was she going to eat someone alive? The Blood Moon sect elder then followed them to figure out what was going on. Outside the practice hall, Song Juanqiu was with the 3 disciples. Their faces were very pleasant. That girl's growth is not bad at her age. She will be nicer after a few years. After a few years. I think her innocence now is just right. It is so satisfying to watch her begging me. The 3 disciples laughed, and their faces were full of contentment. Song Juanqiu sneered as he saw how filthy the people were. He did not care about the girl at all. He was involved just because Enrich was Enchanting's servant. Song Juanqiu resented her so much every time he recalled how Enchanting framed him and how he lost so many bottles of Song Juanqiu to Feng Moli. Now Enchanting was not in the sect, there was no issue for inner sect disciples to punish her attendant girl. When the 3 people were discussing, Song Juanqiu noticed a person approaching. He narrowed his eyes and exchanged glances with the 3 people. The 3 of them stopped their discussion and looked towards the person. All 3 of them laughed. Isn't this our junior sister Yi? What happened to your sword boy? How come he is injured? It's a bit too harsh for you to treat your servant like this, one of the disciples smiled and said. His arrogant face appeared so disgusting. Fei Ying, who followed Enchanting, wanted to go forward when he saw Song Juanqiu and the 3 people, but he was stopped by Enchanting. Junior sister Yi, what are you so angry for? Song Juanqiu smiled, but his scornful sight glanced at Enchanting. Where is Enrich? Fei Ying stared at them and asked. Song Juanqiu took a glance at Fei Ying and sneered. His eyes were full of disdain. He looked at Yi Qingtang and said, "Junior sister Yi, where are your servants' manners? A mere sword boy dares to challenge your inner sect disciples?" Yi Qingtang squinted her eyes and pulled Fei Ying back. She scanned through their faces, and she suddenly smiled. "I had entered the inner sect for a month now. I heard that inner sect disciples could compete among ourselves. Senior brothers, are you willing to compete against me in the life and death ring?" Yi Qingtang asked. Life and death ring. Song Juanqiu and the rest were stunned. The sect did not allow private fighting among the disciples, but there were always conflicts between disciples. To ban private fighting, there was a life and death ring in the inner sect. On the life and death ring, death was determined by destiny. Even if one were to die on the ring, no one would receive any punishment. However, fighting on the life and death ring needed to be approved by the inner sect wardens. Both parties had to sign the life and death agreement. Yi Qingtang just entered the sect for a month, and she dared to challenge them. Song Juanqiu and the rest laughed when they realized what she was talking about. "Junior sister Yi, you want to go onto the life and death ring against 4 of us? Are you joking?" Chapter 373, Life and Death Ring, 1. A new disciple who just entered the sect for a month challenged 4 people to fight on the life and death ring. Was she trying to commit suicide? Song Juanqiu sneered. He realized that she was trying to take revenge for enrich. However, Wuxia Sight, did she not know her own abilities? How did she dare to be so arrogant? She was going to commit suicide. Fei Ying was stunned as well. He heard of the life and death ring as he spent quite a long time in the inner sect. He hated these 4 people, but he did not expect Yi Qingtang to want to fight against them on the life and death ring for enrich. Fei Ying was a little bewildered. He held Yi Qingtang's sleeves, and he was very nervous. "Miss, the martial qi level 1 had 4 heavens. Every heaven consisted of 3 stages. They had been in the inner sect for a few years. The 3 disciples were at the 2nd stage of the 1st heaven of martial qi level 1, and Song Juanqiu was at the 3rd stage. Yi Qingtang had only entered the inner sect for a month, and she just reached the 1st heaven of the martial qi level 1. She was at the 1st stage of the 1st heaven. There was a great difference in ability between her and the 3 disciples and a greater difference with Song Juanqiu. With every stage difference of the marital qi, the difference of the ability was immense. It was suicide for Yi Qingtang to challenge the 4 people on the life and death ring alone. "I'm not joking. Do you dare to accept my challenge?" Yi Qingtang looked at the 4 people seriously. They suddenly laughed. "Of course we accept. Why not? Since you are so brave, we have to accept your challenge." Song Juanqiu smiled. "Invite the warden over now. Since junior sister Yi has met the requirements, we must accept as her senior brothers," Song Juanqiu said to one of the disciples. The disciple immediately invited the warden over. The warden was surprised as he heard that Yi Qingtang wanted to challenge the 4 people at the same time on the life and death ring. "The 5 of you, are you sure about it?" The warden asked cautiously. He revealed a complex look as he turned towards Yi Qingtang. The life and death ring was a dangerous ring in the inner sect. There were some disciples who challenged others on the ring. But Yi Qingtang, as a new disciple, wanted to challenge 4 people at the same time. What nonsense! "Yes." Yi Qingtang replied firmly. "Then the 5 of you have to sign the life and death agreement. Whether you live or die on the ring will depend on your destiny," the warden said after seeing that his persuasion was not working. The 5 of them did not object and signed the agreement in front of the warden. Song Juanqiu was the last to sign. He sneered as he saw Yi Qingtang's name on the agreement. Wuxia Sight, he wanted to teach Yi Qingtang a lesson, but she was rushing to commit suicide. Even if they were to beat her to death on the ring, no one would say anything about them. The challenge will be 10 days later. You shall go to the life and death ring. The warden kept away the agreement and left a reminder. Song Juanqiu stared at Yi Qingtang in an evil way after the warden left. Junior sister Yi, I shall wait for you at the life and death ring 10 days later. Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes. Wait, she suddenly said as Song Juanqiu and the rest were about to leave. Chapter 374, Life and Death Ring, 2. Song Juanqiu slowed down his path and turned to look at Yi Qingtang. Do you regret your choice now, junior sister Yi? Yi Qingtang sneered. Where is Enrich? Song Juanqiu lifted his eyebrows and took a glance at Yi Qingtang. Enrich. He then appeared to suddenly remember something and smiled. Are you talking about your servant girl? Don't be so nervous. We saw the potential of that girl, and that's why we brought her away to teach her. If you are concerned, I'll ask someone to send her back later. The other 3 disciples' faces changed. They had yet tasted the girl. How could she be returned to Yi Qingtang so soon? They were about to speak when Song Juanqiu glanced at them, and they had to remain silent. Thank you, senior brother Song, Yi Qingtang said. You're welcome. Song Juanqiu replied. From the start, Song Juanqiu was involved because of the grudge between them. Now that Yi Qingtang would face her destiny soon once she stepped onto the life and death ring, Enrich was useless to him. Furthermore, even though some disciples would punish their attendant girls and sword boys in the inner sect, this could not be discussed openly. If the wardens or the elders found out about that, those disciples would be punished. They kidnapped Enrich previously as Yi Qingtang was not back yet, and Fei Ying would not be able to see the wardens and the elders as a sword boy. That was why they dared to kidnap her. However, Yi Qingtang was back now. If they still held Enrich, she might report the case to the wardens and the elders. They would face the consequence then. Do you have any other things, junior sister Yi? Song Juanqiu smiled and asked. Nope. Song Juanqiu smiled and left with the other 3 disciples. Fei Ying gritted his teeth as the 4 people walked away arrogantly. Young lady, you do not need to fight against them on the life and death ring. If we report to the wardens and the elders that they kidnapped Enrich, they will be punished. Fei Ying felt gracious towards Yi Qingtang for rescuing them, but he was also worried for Yi Qingtang's safety. However, Yi Qingtang shook her head insistently. Enrich was just an attendant girl. If they reported the case, Song Juanqiu and the rest would only receive light punishments. Furthermore, Song Juanqiu had some connections with one of the wardens in the inner sect. This was not the revenge that Yi Qingtang wanted. I will take revenge with my own hands, Yi Qingtang said and squinted her eyes. How could she let the people who dared to touch her people go? Fei Ying was in a complex mood as he stared at Yi Qingtang's face. The Blood Moon sect elder had witnessed the whole situation and figured out the whole story. Based on his understanding of Yi Qingtang, she would use her life to protect her people. Their abilities are above yours. Are you sure you are going to fight against them together on the life and death ring? The Blood Moon sect elder said. Yi Qingtang now was still weaker than the weakest person in the 4 of them. How could she win? You don't need to worry about this. Yi Qingtang replied. The Blood Moon sect elder was stunned. I would have never cared for you if you did not bribe me with the bonded soul pill. I wish you die as soon as possible. Yi Qingtang headed back after signing the life and death agreement. Not long after Yi Qingtang and Fei Ying returned to their home, Enrich was sent back by Song Juanqiu's people. Chapter 375, Life and Death Ring, 3, but when Enchanting saw Enrish's current appearance, it was as though a huge rock was pressed on her chest, causing her to be so stifled that breathing was difficult. The usually petite and pretty girl was laying on bed breathlessly. Her tiny body was covered with bruises, and her clothes were already badly torn. Her fair face was discolored from the bruises, and there was a huge cut on her forehead of which blood flowed along her temples and stained the pillow under her head completely red. Enrich. Fei Ying saw Enrish's tragic appearance and broke down on the floor immediately. Enchanting narrowed her eyes at Enrish's situation, and her breathing deepened. "Get out," Enchanting ordered coldly. Enrich sustained too many injuries, and if not treated immediately, she would be completely crippled even if she kept her life. Looking at Enchanting's cold side profile, Fei Ying did not dare to hesitate and immediately left the room. He shut the door tight and collapsed against it. He clasped his hands tightly and placed it against his forehead as he prayed repeatedly. He was too useless and thus caused Enrich to suffer such torture. He must become stronger. No matter what price he had to pay, he must obtain more power and never ever allow the people around him to suffer again. In the room, Enchanting took out many elixirs from her space ring and swiftly checked Enric's injuries. Enrich had countless internal and external injuries. Just looking at those hideous wounds, she did not dare to imagine what kind of torture and humiliation she suffered in these 3 days. Looking at Enric's current appearance, Enchanting could not help but recall the young girl's shy smile when she nervously called her "Miss" on the first day they met. Enchanting took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the murderous intent in her heart. "Song Juancho, just you wait. I will definitely return this 100-fold." Enchanting forced herself to calm down and used the spirit energy in her body to heal her injuries. She poured large amounts of elixirs into Enric's mouth without finding it a shame, all to ensure that Enrich kept on to her last breath. After encountering this incident right after she returned, she was fully occupied from day to late night. Enric's condition finally stabilized a little. As her breathing gradually stabilized, her tightly shut eyes opened with difficulty. When her clear eyes were opened, terror and despair were written in her eyes as she let out a shrill cry. Don't touch me." Enrich crawled up in fear. Trembling, she clutched on the blanket tightly and curled up in the corner of the bed. Her struggle caused the wound that had yet to heal to rip open once again, and gushes of blood stained the pure white bandage. "Enrich, it's me. Don't be afraid." Upon seeing Enric's terrified behavior, Enchanting did her best to gently comfort Enrich. Enrich could not stop trembling in fear. After seeing that the person before her was Enchanting, it was as though her body broke down entirely as her purpled lips quivered and parted slightly. "Me. Miss," large teardrops slid out from her eyes silently. Looking at Enchanting, who was like the last straw to clutch at, she fell into Enchanting's arms in despair. "Miss. You're back. You're finally back," a heart-wrenching voice escaped Enric's mouth. Chapter 376, Life and Death Ring, 4. Enchanting lightly hugged the tiny frame that never stopped trembling, and her brows furrowed. "It's all over. I am back already. No one can ever harm you again." Enrich clutched onto Enchanting's clothes tightly and choked in between sobs. No one could imagine what kind of suffering she went through in these few days. Enchanting's heart ached as she pacified the young girl. Rage gradually flamed up within her as she felt a warm sensation on her blouse due to Enric's tears. In the room, Enric's cries traveled out from the cracks of the door. Upon hearing Enric's heartbreaking cries, Fei Ying, who was sitting outside the door, felt as if a knife was pierced in his heart. He clenched his teeth and punched the hard rock ground. Even though his knuckles were bleeding badly, it never suppressed the excruciating pain in his heart. Enrich cried for a long time. With her age, how difficult must it have been for her to go through those 3 days of torture? She mumbled the torture she experienced in these few days in choppy sentences. The more Enchanting listened, the more the murderous feeling in her intensified. In her previous life, Enrich did not meet Enchanting and did not have the slightest ability to protect herself, thus ending up being tortured to death. But this time, the only lucky thing was that Enrich was never really humiliated by those 3 bastards. Before this, the cultivation techniques that Enchanting taught Enrich protected Enrich's last thread of dignity. While she was unable to escape, she resisted desperately and never allowed the 3 disciples to have their way, though the number of beatings she suffered from the resistance was not little. Enrich was exhausted from crying, and her originally frail body could not support itself. Between sobs, she eventually fell into a deep slumber in Enchanting's arms. However, there no longer was neither pain nor despair on Enrich's face this time. She knew that Miss was back, and she was finally safe. Enchanting gently settled Enrich in bed and left the room. There was a faint smell of blood outside. There were no emotions on her face when she saw Fei Ying, who collapsed outside the door, and his badly battered fists, which left a trail of blood on the ground. "Do you hate it?" Enchanting asked with a low voice. Fei Ying looked down and nodded firmly. "Become stronger then. Strong enough to protect the people around you and never let them suffer again. Otherwise, even if you kill yourself from the hatred, it would only be a joke to those people," Enchanting said coldly. Fei Ying suddenly looked up. In the dark night, his bright yet sharp eyes were like knives from which the innocence belonging to a young teen was completely absent. "Miss, I wish to become stronger." Enchanting chuckled and nodded. "I will teach you after the life and death ring. Before that, you must take good care of Enrich. Do you hear me?" "Yes." Fei Ying gave a firm nod, but worry suddenly emerged in his heart. "Miss, that life and death ring, I know my limits." Afterward, Enchanting returned to her own room. Enrich's injuries weighed heavily on Enchanting's heart. She was clearly aware that her current skills were not considered the top amongst the inner sect disciples, but she must avenge Enrich without a doubt. There were still 10 days left. She must make a breakthrough in these 10 days. Otherwise, even if she went on the life and death ring, she would be the one who died. In her room, her eyes narrowed as she thought of the life and death ring that was going to happen 10 days later. 10 days. Chapter 377, Ice and Fire. 1. Enchanting was only at the first stage of the first heaven in the martial chi level 1 realm, while Song Juanqiu was already at the third stage of the first heaven and was only a step away from entering the second heaven. To win against Song Juanqiu and the rest on the life and death ring, the only option for her was to break through to the second heaven state in these 10 days. However, to advance an entire realm in such a short span of time was easier said than done. Enchanting was able to achieve remarkable improvements on the eve of the inner sect assessment back then by relying on the effects that the upgrade of her spirit root brought. Enchanting realized that every time her spirit root was improved, her abilities would increase by leaps and bounds. Currently, she was already an orange spirit root, and while the inner sect was rich in spirit energy, she could clearly feel that the advancement of her spirit root was gradually slowing. The higher the spirit root was, the harder it was to nourish it. The reason she came to Xianling sect was for the Black Heaven water in Xianling sect's mystic realm, which the Palace Lord of the Antiquity Palace talked about the other day. Only the Black Heaven water could allow her spirit root to improve at a faster speed. It was just that there were still months to the start of the mystic realm, and only highly ranked disciples in the inner sect have the qualifications to enter. Given Yi Qingtang's current position in the inner sect, she would probably not have the qualification to enter even if the mystic realm opened. She only had 10 days worth of time then. Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes as she pondered over the methods which could increase her skills rapidly. Her eyes swept across the room but realized a familiar figure was missing. Xiao Guai. Astonished, Yi Qingtang stood up and searched around her courtyard to no avail, with only the little lightning dragon laying on the bed dejectedly. She only found out from Fei Ying that the silver wolf disappeared unknowingly after she left, and they could not find it despite days of searching. What is going on exactly? Yi Qingtang's brows were furrowed tightly. When she was in the outer sect, she had entrusted the silver wolf under Qin Huan's care as well when she went out on a mission, but when she returned, Qin Huan said the silver wolf disappeared. It was just that Yi Qingtang thought Qin Huan was blabbering nonsense when she saw the silver wolf. Yet, unexpectedly, the silver wolf actually disappeared again. Yi Qingtang found it strange but could not see any traces of the silver wolf. The life and death ring was going to happen 10 days later, and she could not be distracted to search for it right now. Furthermore, Fei Ying had to take care of Anai Shang. Thus, she could only suppress the matter for the moment. She did not know whether it was an illusion or not, but she was not the slightest anxious although she knew the silver wolf was nowhere to be found, as though she had a premonition somehow. The disappearance of the silver wolf was not because of any external factors but its own decision. Leaving the disappearance case aside, Yi Qingtang focused on the matter at hand. With her usual cultivation, breaking through from stage 1 of the first heaven to the second heaven in 10 days was almost impossible. Time was limited, and Yi Qingtang could only take another route. The next morning, Yi Qingtang dragged the drowsy Blood Moon sect elder up. How many Xianming points do you still have? Yi Qingtang suddenly asked. The Blood Moon sect elder was still half asleep as he looked at the number on his bracelet. About 2,000. A large portion of the Xianming points was left by Zhou Chu. Since the Blood Moon sect elder did not find a use for anything, he had never touched it at all and even earned quite an amount from the mission with Yi Qingtang before. Give it to me, Yi Qingtang said straightforwardly. What? The Blood Moon sect elder was slightly stunned. Yi Qingtang could not be bothered to explain anything and took out a bottle of the summoning soul pills. Exchange or not? Chapter 378, Ice and Fire, 2, Exchange. The Blood Moon sect elder's eyes flickered after seeing the summoning soul pill. Xianming points were only a string of numbers to him without any use, but the summoning soul pill was a baby. Then, the Blood Moon sect elder slid all his Xianming points to Yi Qingtang's bracelet and hugged the bottle of summoning soul pills with a blissful smile. With the 2,000 Xianming points from the Blood Moon sect elder and the few thousand she had, Yi Qingtang had nearly 6,000 Xianming points. Subsequently, she sprinted to the Xianming pavilion with the curious Blood Moon sect elder following right after. Yi Qingtang's arrival in the pavilion immediately drew the attention of many disciples. Yi Qingtang. I heard that she issued a challenge on the life and death ring to Song Juanqiu and his 3 followers yesterday. Is it true? Can it not be? The life and death agreement was already signed. In my opinion, she is simply seeking death. She just entered the inner sect for a month yet dared to issue a challenge to 4 people. If that isn't seeking death, then what is? Why do I remember that Yi Qingtang is a red spirit root? It was already pretty strange when she entered the inner sect previously. Why is she stirring up trouble now? She is the only red spirit root in the inner sect, which is rather amazing if I were to say. However, she is a little overboard on this matter. What is her skill level now? She's at most stage 1 of the first heaven in martial chi level 1, but she actually dared to challenge them. Fighting against 4 people at one go. Is she really tired of living? Just an inflated ego. There was a clamor of discussion amongst the disciples. The news of Enchanting challenging Song Junkia's clique had already circulated widely in the inner sect, provoking much noise. It could be said to be the biggest joke in the inner sect recently. Enchanting walked into the Xianming pavilion without bothering about the discussions. "I want to exchange for the quenching flame pill," Enchanting said to the Xianming pavilion warden. The quenching flame pill was a type of pill that could stimulate spirit energy and allow the spirit energy in one's body to reach a peak in a short span of time. The disciples watched Enchanting in curiosity and reckoned that the quenching flame pill that she exchanged for was to be used on the life and death ring. However, while the quenching flame pill could boost one's skills in a short time, the duration of the peak state was extremely short. Moreover, it could stimulate the spirit energy to the maximum because it forcefully catalyzed the effect of the spirit energy in the body. Once the effect wore off, the user would fall into a frail condition very quickly. Even if Enchanting consumed the quenching flame pill and displayed her peak abilities, it would still be difficult for her to deal with Song Juanqiu and the rest on the life and death ring. After all, she had not reached the realm of those 4 disciples, and the difference of a stage was enough to produce a landslide victory. The warden looked at Enchanting and said, 100 Xianming points for 1 pill. How many pills do you want? After making an estimation, Enchanting finally replied. 20. Enchanting's words caused the onlooking disciples to be dumbfounded. 20 pills. Is she treating the quenching flame pill as a mud bowl? Disciples would only prepare at most 1 pill on usual days. Who would buy 20 pills at once? Is she insane? If she swallowed all of them in a go, wouldn't she explode and die? The warden clearly did not expect Enchanting to ask for so many as well and only returned to his senses after a while. You want 20 pills? Yes. Enchanting nodded. The warden looked at Enchanting strangely and really could not figure out what she wanted those for. However, since she wanted to exchange for the items, he naturally did not have any reason to stop her. Chapter 379, Ice and Fire, 3. The warden took out 20 quenching flame pills and slid away 2,000 Xianming points from Enchanting. To inner sect disciples, 2,000 Xianming points were not considered to be a huge pinch in their hearts, but it was not a small amount either. When the disciples saw Enchanting wasting 2,000 Xianming points just like that, they could not help but mumble that she was a fool. Enchanting kept the quenching flame pills but did not leave. She calculated her remaining Xianming points and subsequently said, "I still wish to exchange for ice skin powder." Ice skin powder. The warden raised a brow as he looked at Enchanting with an even stranger expression. If the quenching flame pill was to stimulate spirit energy, then the ice skin powder was a medicinal powder which could completely seal the spirit energy in the body. It was often smeared over one's body during hunting as it could conceal the air released by the spirit energy. However, it would also suppress the use of spirit energy, and hence, most would wipe off the ice skin powder cleanly in a real fight. The 2 items that Enchanting asked for consecutively were conflicting in nature, and the warden was even more confused as to what Enchanting had up her sleeves. The surrounding disciples were all the more at a loss. Could it be that Enchanting still intended to use the ice skin powder as a secret weapon and scatter it all over Song Juanqiu and the rest on the life and death ring? Just the thought of that caused them to be unable to stifle their laughter. There was not much use for the ice skin powder, and thus, the Xianming points required were not much. However, Enchanting used all her remaining 3,000 Xianming points to exchange for 2 whole buckets of ice skin powder. Without a single Xianming point left, Enchanting finally returned to her residence. As the disciples watched Enchanting leave with 2 buckets of ice skin powder without saying anything, laughter played in the eyes of the disciples in the Xianming pavilion. Near 6,000 Xianming points were spent just like that. How extravagant, if I were to say, wouldn't it be better to cultivate a few hours in the Spirit Consonance River with those Xianming points? What can she do with a pile of quenching flame pills and ice skin powder? Could she swallow all 20 quenching flame pills in a go on the life and death ring? Swallow all? Don't kid me. If she consumed so many of it in a short time, Yi Qingtang would just die on the ring without Song Juanqiu and the rest laying a finger. Watching Yi Qingtang's slowly departing back view, the disciples could not stop snickering as they felt that Yi Qingtang was walking further down the path of death. They were afraid that she would have an ugly death 10 days later. After leaving Xianming Pavilion, Yi Qingtang returned to her residence straight away. Fei Ying was still looking after Anai Shang. Thus, Yi Qingtang got herself a bathtub of hot water. She shut her door tightly and laid the quenching flame pills and the ice skin powder aside. Her eyes were narrowed as she looked at the room that was lingering with mist. After testing the temperature of the water, she immediately poured half a bucket of ice skin powder into the bathtub. The ice skin powder, which gave off a cold air, dissolved in the water. Immediately, the water that was initially producing steam lost all its heat and was faintly emitting a slight tinge of cold air. Seeing that the ice skin powder was completely dissolved, Yi Qingtang subsequently took off her outer cloak and entered the bathtub. The ice-cold water brimmed over her in an instant. The effect of half a bucket of ice skin powder caused the water in the bathtub to drop to a piercingly cold temperature. In just a moment, Yi Qingtang's complexion turned pale from the cold. However, she took a deep breath and forced herself to bear the bitter cold. She sat in the bathtub cross-legged, trying with all her might to ignore the prickling cold on her skin. Chapter 380, Ice and Fire. 4. Yi Qingtang took a deep breath and swallowed a quenching flame pill. The quenching flame pill dissolved the moment it entered her mouth, with its bitterness mixed with a burning sensation traveling down from her throat to her abdomen. Instantly, a blazing-like burn spread throughout Yi Qingtang's abdomen. The boiling hot sensation in her body and the piercing cold on her skin formed a distinct contrast. Under the catalysis of the quenching flame pill, the spirit energy in Yi Qingtang's body began to surge continuously throughout her entire body and reached a peak. That surging spirit energy desperately wanted to escape the body in search of a place to be released, but the water that was mixed with large quantities of ice skin powder, which her body was submerged in, sealed that wild energy in her body with not a tiny bit being leaked out. To advance one realm in 10 days was absolutely not what an ordinary person could achieve and definitely impossible for even a rare genius of a century. To win the life and death ring 10 days later, she had to take another route. What she did today was an extreme method which stimulated her potential. She used the medicinal effect of the quenching flame pill to stimulate her spirit energy to a peak in a short span of time and then used the ice skin powder to seal all the spirit energy in the body. This type of cultivation method was only discovered 100 years later in her previous life, and obviously, no one was aware of it currently. As long as Yi Qingtang could withstand the torture of the two extremes of ice and fire, she could continue to be at her ultimate limit. Cultivating under this extreme condition could allow the improvement in her cultivation to be maximized. However, there was a drawback to this cultivation method. Forcefully sealing the surging spirit energy in her body would be an extremely great burden to the spirit root. If the spirit energy surged too much, the spirit root might even be damaged and ruined. Hence, in her previous life, although many knew of this method which could increase their skills rapidly, only a few dared to use it. However, Yi Qingtang knew a method which could avoid the spirit root from being ruined. Yi Qingtang slowly raised the floating pagoda that was held in her hand for a long time. She placed her hands together and positioned the floating pagoda in her palm. In the interlacing of ice and fire, she calmed her heart and catalyzed the floating pagoda, guiding its energy into her body bit by bit. These floating pagodas were obtained back in the treasure pavilion in Lin Town. All this while, she had always used the floating pagoda to nourish her spirit root. Floating pagodas were rather effective in nourishing the spirit root, and in this extreme cultivation method, it could protect the spirit root from suffering any damage. Enchanting still had a few floating pagodas in her hands, which should be enough for 10 days of cultivation. With the floating pagoda's protection of the spirit root which isolated the damage from the quenching flame pill, Enchanting calmed her heart and regulated her breathing, completely absorbed in her cultivation. In the torment of the extremities, she directed the spirit energy in her body to her 8 extraordinary meridians. With the flow of the spirit energy, Enchanting could clearly feel that the spirit energy in her body was increasing sharply along with time. Delight filled her, but she did not dare to move around. In just an instant, she calmed down and continued cultivating. Because the spirit energy was always sealed in the body, the effect of the quenching flame pill did not disappear completely, and this extreme cultivation could be sustained. Enchanting calculated the duration of the effect that each quenching flame pill could last, which was roughly at most 8 hours. She required at least 2 pills a day, which was why she bought 20 of them. Chapter 381, My Person, 1. A few days later, Enric's injuries slowly healed, and Fei Ying finally heaved a sigh of relief. However, Enchanting remained in her room in these few days and never stepped out. Apart from asking Fei Ying to leave a few buckets of hot water at her door every 2 days, she did not have any orders and even settled her meals in the room by herself. During this period of time, Ji Xianyuan heard that Enchanting was about to enter the life and death ring and came a few times but was blocked by Fei Ying, who said that Enchanting was not receiving any guests. Days passed, and the life and death ring matter circulated around the entire inner sect. The life and death ring was not the same as normal rings since they were really battling with their lives. Although there was such a rule in the inner sect, only a few dared to enter the life and death ring. In the past 3 years, Enchanting was the only disciple who initiated a life and death ring challenge, and her opponents were as many as 4 people. As everyone was absorbed in discussions, it was as though Enchanting disappeared from everyone's sight, and almost no one saw her in any martial arts hall. Could Enchanting be scared already? If it were you, wouldn't you be scared? Do you dare to go through such suffering? I think it's still not too late for her to regret now. I heard that Song Juanqiu and the rest did not have any special reaction these few days. What reaction should they have? All 4 of them are more skilled than Enchanting, and any one of them could play Enchanting to death. Do they still need to train hard? Don't joke anymore. Seeing that there was only a day left to the life and death ring, everyone could not help but be curious about whether Enchanting really dared to take on the challenge the next day. In the courtyard, moonlight scattered over the ground in the dark night. Enrich, whose face was still bruised, walked to Enchanting's room with a tray of dishes in her hands and saw Fei Ying guarding outside the door. Fei Ying shook his head. Enrich could not help but be worried. Miss has already cultivated in seclusion for 10 days and never left her room. What should we do? I am all to blame. If not because of me, Miss would not need to enter whatever life and death ring with those 4 bastards. Guilt was written all over Enric's face. In the eyes of inner sect disciples, attendant girls like them were no different from servants, and it was already lucky to not be mistreated or lambasted. No one had thought that the inner sect disciple they followed would stand up for them. After regaining consciousness, she heard from Fei Ying that Enchanting was to enter the life and death ring. One could imagine how shocking Enchanting's decision was to Enrich. I'm so useless. I can't do anything for Miss and can only worry. Enrich bit her lips. A thought suddenly struck her, and she turned to face Fei Ying. Fei Ying, if Miss doesn't enter the life and death ring tomorrow, do you think she would be safe? Fei Ying was slightly stunned. The life and death agreement is already signed. If Miss doesn't enter, she would probably be ridiculed by everyone in the future. Given Miss' character, she will not be able to bear it. Enrich pursed her lips, and a resolute expression flashed across her eyes. She suddenly handed the tray of dishes into Fei Ying's hands. Take care of Mississippi. With that, she prepared to leave. Enrich, what do you want to do? An ominous thought emerged in Fei Ying's heart, and he quickly pulled Enrich's wrist. Enrich took a deep breath and explained. I cannot let Miss be involved in this. This matter was started because of me. How could I stand around and not do anything? I will look for them. I know what they want. As long as I beg them, perhaps they will let Miss off. Chapter 382, My Person, 2. Fei Ying's eyes suddenly widened as he stared at Enrich in disbelief. You, Enrich laughed bitterly and broke free from Fei Ying's grip. Take good care of Miss for me. It is me who doesn't have this blessing. I've troubled Mississippi. Then, Enrich immediately headed out of the courtyard without turning back. Enrich. Fei Ying was alarmed. Enrich did not stop in her tracks at all. She walked to the entrance of the courtyard and pushed open the gate. Looking at the misty dark night, she knew that there was no return when she took this step. However, she did not regret. Fei Ying panicked and instinctively wanted to rush up and stop her. However, the tightly shut door behind him suddenly opened, and a figure shuffled out behind him. Just as Enrich was about to step out of the courtyard, a wet hand pulled her back into the courtyard hard, and a slender leg directly kicked the door shut. With a clear bang, the gate was closed once again. Enrich, who was dizzy by the sudden motion, was pressed on the gate with an arm. Where are you going? A rather raspy voice sounded in Enrich's ears. Enrich looked up in surprise and saw Enchanting, who was wearing only a thin garment, trapped her at the gate with an arm. The faint moonlight cast on Enchanting in the hazy night. Her damp hair hung loosely at the side of her face as drops of water fell from her hair ends. At that moment, her clear eyes were slightly narrowed as though her eyes were a galaxy, deep yet dreamy. Wuxia world. Sight the pair wondrous of eyes were fixed on the astonished Enrich. Me. Miss, Enrich's lips quivered as she looked at the stunning face near hers. Listen well. Enchanting lowered her head a little. Her breaths brushed across the tip of Enrich's nose. Suddenly, she lifted Enrich's chin with her wet fingers and stared right into Enrich's eyes. You are my person. I will definitely not allow you to do anything that will harm yourself. Do you hear it? Enrich looked at Enchanting, dazed. Enchanting silently pulled apart from Enrich and turned to face Fei Ying, who had blanked out behind her. Watch Enrich properly. If she sneaks out tonight, I will strip you naked and put you on display outside the courtyard. Fei Ying suddenly returned to his senses. Looking at Enchanting, who was bathing in the moonlight, and hearing her warning, he swallowed his saliva. Miss, you're as gentle as a spring wind to Enrich, but so heartless like a storm to me. You cannot favor girls and not boys. Although these thoughts ran in his head, Fei Ying still ran over and pulled Enrich aside. Enrich returned to her senses and was about to say something, but Enchanting covered Enrich's tiny mouth. If you're really worried, you and Fei Ying can just go to the ring tomorrow to watch. Enrich blinked. Confusion filled her eyes as she stared at Enchanting, who exuded a devilish air. Miss, seems to be a little different from usual. Enchanting gave Fei Ying a look, and he immediately dragged Enrich away, watching over her as per Enchanting's orders. Under the moonlight, Enchanting looked up slightly, and she lazily stretched her body when the moonlight fell on her face. Wuxia World. Sight, this cultivation method is really deadly. However, its effects were satisfying. Becoming more powerful was not to bully the weak but to protect the people around you. Enchanting looked down at her palm, and the corners of her lips tugged into an evil smile. Song Juanqiu, the few of you can just clean your necks and wait for death tomorrow. Chapter 383, Come Up Together. 1. 10 days were over in the blink of an eye. That morning, many disciples crowded around the life and death ring. Song Juanqiu and the other 3 disciples arrived early in the morning. They stood beside the ring and chatted with other disciples. Senior brother Song, do you think Enchanting really dares to come today? An onlooking disciple asked. Maybe not. Didn't you notice how she disappeared these past few days? She was nowhere to be seen even in the martial arts hall. She isn't even cultivating. What does she have to fight you all on the life and death ring with? Perhaps she has been working behind closed doors. Working behind closed doors. Ha! Who does she think she is? If her cultivation level could increase by kneeling in the room, then why do we still need to enter the sect? Might as well kneel at home. Isn't that better? This group of disciples did not conceal their dislike of Enchanting, with their words covertly supporting Song Juanqiu. Song Juanqiu was related to an inner sect elder, and thus, there were naturally benefits to be on his good side. Enchanting was merely a disciple who just entered the inner sect and came from Lin Town, which no one had heard about. How could she be compared to Song Juanqiu? There were 2 groups of people, one who flattered the powerful and trampled on the humble, and the other who watched the bustle. Song Juanqiu listened to the discussions, and although he did not utter a word, he stuck his chin out, revealing his arrogant attitude as always. Senior brother Song, if Enchanting dares to come, just leave her to us. You don't have to take the trouble to attack her, said the other 3 disciples who were Song Juanqiu's partners in crime. In their eyes, it was simply impossible for Enchanting to win any one of them with her skills. Although Enchanting did challenge the 4 of them, realistically speaking, she would probably not be able to even win against the first opponent. Song Juanqiu did not say anything. His eyes scanned the crowd, but Enchanting was nowhere to be seen. The life and death ring is about to start already. Why is Enchanting still not here? Could she really be scared? If she's scared, wouldn't she become a laughingstock in the inner sect from today on? She was the one who initiated the life and death ring. She was so arrogant initially yet hiding in cowardice now. Does she still want her face? Face? Do you think she wants her face or her life? If she really entered the life and death ring, she would probably not be able to leave it alive. There was a clamor of discussions. Time passed, but Enchanting was still nowhere to be seen. Then, everyone could not help but suspect if Enchanting was really afraid and did not dare to meet for the challenge. Senior brother Song, do you want to send someone to take a look? One of the 3 disciples asked. Song Juanqiu waved a hand. Although he wanted to use this opportunity to kill Enchanting on the life and death ring, if Enchanting did not have the courage to enter the ring and admitted defeat, there was no way he could force Enchanting into the ring according to the rules. It was all up to Enchanting to decide whether to come or not. However, if she dared to stand up to them today, she would probably not be able to survive in the inner sect in the future. If the elders heard that Enchanting broke the agreement, her future prospects would basically be gone. At that thought, Song Juanqiu could not help but sneer. The moment Enchanting issued the challenge, she was destined to not have any way out. As Song Juanqiu guessed that Enchanting would not appear today, there was suddenly a bustle in the crowd. 3 people walked into everyone's sight, and the person in the lead was Enchanting, whom everyone had been waiting for a long time. Chapter 384, Come Up Together, 2, Enchanting, you really dared to come. When Song Juanqiu caught sight of Enchanting, his lips tugged into a sneer, and a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Since she was courting death, naturally, he was not going to be polite. Enchanting's arrival instantly attracted everyone's attention. Enchanting really dared to come for the challenge. Does she not want her life anymore? This junior sister is really bold. Under everyone's eyes, Enchanting walked to stand in front of the 4 people with Enrich and Fei Ying following behind her. When Enrich's eyes landed on the 4 of them, a suppressed hatred emerged in her eyes. Junior sister Yi, you made us wait for quite some time, said Song Juanqiu with a smile, though his raised brows and laughing eyes were proof of the smugness and sarcasm he felt at that very moment. Sorry for making you all wait for a long time. Enchanting smiled. It is about time. Do you still want to enter the life and death ring, junior sister Yi? Song Juanqiu narrowed his eyes and spoke in a louder voice. Of course. Enchanting smiled faintly. Enrich tugged the hem of Enchanting's clothes worriedly, and Enchanting slowly turned around. Pinching Enrich's soft cheeks, she said softly, take a good look later. Enrich nodded nervously and finally released her grip. After pacifying Enrich, Enchanting took a leap and was the first to enter the life and death ring. Which of us do you wish to challenge first? Song Juanqiu asked. Her cold eyes glimpsed across the 4 people. Suddenly, her lips curled up, and she pointed in the direction of the 4 of them. There's no need for sequence. You all can come up together. Everyone present was taken aback immediately. What was Enchanting saying? She actually wanted to go against 4 people by herself at once. Was she insane? Enchanting's words stunned everyone. They had seen people who did not want their lives anymore, but not one who was so hurried to court death. All 4 of them were at a higher level than she was, and she was probably not their opponent even in a 1-to-1 match, much less 1-to-4. She must really be tired of living. Song Juanqiu, similarly, had a surprised expression, but he returned to normal very quickly. You wish to challenge the 4 of us at the same time? Yes. Enchanting replied without hesitation. Looking at Enchanting's behavior, a sarcastic look flashed across Song Juanqiu's eyes. He exchanged a look with the other 3 people and announced. Since it is junior sister Yes' request, we can only fulfill it. Then, the 4 of them entered the ring. Watching the 5 people on the life and death ring, the onlooking disciples were instantly excited. They originally thought that it was a match of which Enchanting overestimated her abilities, but they did not expect it to actually develop to such a crazy state. Not mentioning anything else, just Enchanting's request to challenge 4 people by herself at once caused many to gasp. Do you want to bet? How long can Enchanting last on the ring? Some disciples joked around. At most 1/5 the time that an incense stick takes to burn. 1/5. You really think highly of her. If it was 1-to-1, perhaps she would be able to last that long, but now, she is dealing with all 4 of them. Let's not talk about the other 3 for now, but Song Juanqiu himself is famous for his underhand attacks. Previously, I've already heard that Song Juanqiu once caused trouble for Enchanting, but she landed him into trouble instead, and he was almost boxed by Feng Moli. With this chance, do you think Song Juanqiu would let Enchanting off so easily? Chapter 385, Come Up Together, 3, There's Such an Incident. Of course. If I were to say, Enchanting would probably just die without being able to make a second move. There was an eruption of messy discussions. Beside the ring, Fei Ying and Enric's palms were sweaty from the nervousness. Everything they heard was unfavorable to Enchanting, and while Enchanting was set on entering the ring, they felt their hearts suspending in the air at that moment. Dear Lord, I'm begging you. Please bless and protect Mississippi. Shang clasped her hands near her lips and softly prayed to the heavens. On the other hand, Fei Ying narrowed his eyes and glared at Song Juanqiu and the other three on the ring. He clenched his fists quietly with an unusually baleful expression in his eyes. If Miss was really defeated, he would definitely make the four of them pay with their blood. On the ring, Song Juanqiu and the other three wore a casual expression as they scanned Yi Qingtang quietly. Senior brother Song, although Yi Qingtang overestimated her abilities, her looks are really likable. It would really be a pity for her to die on the ring. A disciple, who harbored evil designs on Shang previously, had an evil thought after seeing Yi Qingtang's stunning face. Even if it's a pity, it can only be a pity. I don't wish to see her stepping out of the ring alive today, Song Juanqiu said coldly. Yi Qingtang damaged his reputation 2 consecutive times, and if he did not teach her a lesson, how was he to domineer the inner sect in the future? With Song Juanqiu's words, the 3 disciples naturally knew how to act. Song Juanqiu looked up and straight at Yi Qingtang with a wicked gaze. Junior sister Yi, you're so courageous today, and we will naturally not be wet blankets. On the life and death ring, it is up to fate whether one lives or dies. Take care, junior sister Yi. He quietly shot the 3 people a look, and they understood his meaning immediately. The 4 people separated out and trapped Yi Qingtang in the center of the ring from 4 corners. There was a person at all 4 corners, trapping Yi Qingtang, who was positioned in the center. Once the battle started, one could imagine how dangerous it would be when the 4 people attacked together. Song Juanqiu indeed does not intend to go easy. I think Yi Qingtang really will die here this time. Song Juanqiu even brought the glacial frost sword today. He did not intend to let Yi Qingtang off from the start. A disciple's sharp eyes noticed the sword hung on Song Juanqiu's waist. Glacial frost sword. Song Juanqiu brought this glacial frost sword from his family clan. It is said that the sword is very expensive, and if placed in the Xianming Pavilion, it would require 60 to 70,000 Xianming points to exchange for it. I heard that the glacial frost sword is not only extremely sharp but was also made using frozen iron and thus very sturdy. As long as you're injured by the glacial frost sword, the wound would be infected with ice poison immediately. Yi Qingtang is really dead this time. Song Juanqiu had a prestigious background where his family clan possessed a strong influence. The glacial frost sword in his hands was famous as well. Although it was not a top-grade divine weapon, it was still very powerful. With the ice poison attribute, its name was recorded in the weapons register. Song Juanqiu drew out his glacial frost sword immediately, and cold air was emitted from the blade. He glanced at Yi Qingtang's sword with a belittling expression. That sheath was old and simple without any color. After taking a look, Song Juanqiu raised a brow scornfully. Junior sister Yi, draw your sword out. Chapter 386, Merely Like This, 1. Yi Qingtang's eyes were narrowed as an evil smile played on her lips. She glanced at the 4 people and clasped on the handle of the sword quietly with her right hand but did not draw it out. Song Juanqiu saw that Yi Qingtang did not draw her sword out and smiled. I've heard that junior sister Yi achieved a victory in the inner sect assessment just by the motion of drawing out a sword. It seems I can personally witness it today. The motion of drawing a sword required extreme speed and using all of one's strength in the instant when the sword was unsheathed. The very essence laid in the moment the sword left its sheath. That day, Yi Qingtang broke Ji Zanyuan's defense with this move. However, there was a look of sarcasm in Song Juanqiu's eyes. The sword in his hand was not an ordinary sword. Frozen iron was extremely strong, and ordinary weapons would definitely not be able to break it. Even if Enchanting really knew how to use the motion of drawing a sword, there was no way it could break his glacial frost sword. Then, the four people exchanged a look and attacked almost at the same time. Four sharp swords aimed straight at Enchanting, who was right in the center. But when the four of them struck, Enchanting did not react in the way one would usually do and instead closed her eyes and lowered her head slightly. What is she doing? The disciples below the ring were shocked to see Enchanting's actions. In face of four people striking at the same time, she did not hide or avoid and even displayed such composed posture. Wasn't she heading for doom? Enrich and Fei Ying were astounded as well. Seeing that the four swords were already right above Enchanting's head, their hearts raced furiously. "Miss! Be careful!" As Enrich cried in horror, Enchanting suddenly opened her eyes. Her tiny frame moved slightly, and it was as though she turned into a stagger of countless shadows. A glint flashed across her waist and became a whirlwind that swept all four sides. Immediately, clanks rang in the air. Song Juanqiu and the other three disciples could not see Enchanting's movement at all and could only feel pain in the palm where they held the sword. They instinctively withdrew backward. A clattering of swords sounded subsequently. What appeared before their eyes was 3 broken swords laid on the wide ring. What happened? The other 3 disciples were slightly startled, and it was only then they realized that their swords had actually broken. The tip of the swords fell near Enchanting's legs. How could this be? Although their swords were not as impressive as the glacial frost sword in Song Juanqiu's hand, each one of them was priced above 10,000 Xianming points. They were clearly hard-earned swords, yet how could they actually be broken just like that? In the center of the ring, an insolent and evil smile appeared on Enchanting's exquisite face. She lifted her chin up and glanced at the broken swords in the 3 disciples' hands and then at the broken blades near her leg. "Senior brothers, your swords don't seem to be so good." The 3 disciples' faces darkened, and they wanted to go forward instinctively, but this movement caused them to realize the piercing pain in their palm. They looked down at their palms and realized there was already a deep cut in their perlicue where their swords were held against. Gushes of blood dripped along the handle of the sword and onto the ground. How could it be? Chapter 387, Merely like this, too, shock filled their faces. Earlier on, they did not even manage to see how Enchanting struck, and although they heard from Song Juanqiu that Enchanting knew the profound skill of the motion of drawing a sword, they were not too bothered with it. After all, their skills overpowered Enchanting's, and even if she used that move, it would definitely not be able to block one move from them. But the 3 people were a little dumbfounded by everything that happened. 4 people attacked, and 3 swords were broken. Only Song Juanqiu's glacial frost sword did not have any traces of breaking. However, Song Juanqiu's expression was frighteningly dark at that moment. The blood that flowed out of his perlicue gradually stained the sword handle red, and there was actually a 1-finger-wide dent on the blade of the glacial frost sword that he took pride in. The glacial frost sword is damaged. How is this possible? The surrounding disciples below the ring took in the scene with their mouths hung ajar. Enchanting actually used one move to break 3 weapons and damaged the glacial frost sword. How bizarre was that? Everyone's eyes landed on the unattractive sword in Enchanting's hands. At that moment, the disciples realized that the ordinary-looking blade seemed to hold many stars which twinkled brightly under the scorching sun. What is the sword in Enchanting's hand? How could it actually damage the glacial frost sword? I've never seen it before. Song Juanqiu narrowed his eyes. He initially thought that Enchanting would die from this combined attack of 4 people, yet unexpectedly, he embarrassed himself instead. Clutching onto the handle of the glacial frost sword, he looked at Enchanting's sword and spoke coldly. Junior sister yes sword seems to have some background. I wonder what sword it is. Yi Qingtang's lips curled into a seeming smile. Demonic blood sword. Demonic blood sword. Song Juanqiu frowned slightly. He had heard of the demonic blood sword before. It was a pretty good sword that was extremely sharp, and it emitted a demonic air. However, in terms of strength, it was completely incomparable to the glacial frost sword. If the two swords clashed head-on, the broken sword would definitely be the demonic blood sword. However, currently, his glacial frost sword was the one that was chipped off. Song Juanqiu felt that there was something odd about Yi Qingtang's demonic blood sword. They underestimated her previously and did not expect Yi Qingtang to have such a good sword. However, they would not give Yi Qingtang a chance again. Your sword is pretty good, but, to win the ring, you can't rely solely on a good sword, Song Juanqiu said coldly. He exchanged a look with the other three people and immediately charged towards Yi Qingtang with a sword. This time, only Song Juanqiu attacked while the other three stood aside without moving. A scoff flashed across Yi Qingtang's eyes, and her sneer deepened as Song Juanqiu came nearer. In just a moment, Song Juanqiu and Yi Qingtang were in a tussle, and their combined breaths were like a whirlwind that caused turbulence the surrounding air. Song Juanqiu was currently stage 3 of the first heaven. His attacks were violent, and he had frightening strength. He knew that there was something strange about Yi Qingtang's demonic blood sword and thus simply did not intend to fight with her using swords. Directly closing their distance without giving Yi Qingtang a chance to escape, he directed energy into his palm and crashed his palm towards her forehead. Yi Qingtang dodged swiftly and avoided Song Juanqiu's slap.